For everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I would say buenos días, buenas tardes, y buenas noches. Thank you for joining me in discussion on a systems approach to analyzing data in the chemical industry. So I already told you what the topic of the presentation is today, but I will introduce through the course of the discussion the integrated human and organizational performance model, which I developed after, I would say decades, but I'm not that old yet, of experience, a human performance psychologist. I was a researcher at NASA, an NTSB accident investigator, an FAA accident prevention and aircraft certification expert, an aerospace industry executive, and most recently as chairman and CEO of the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Identification Board. I'm currently an independent consultant, and I'll start today by defining a systems approach and the value of applying it across the product and business life cycles to include both reactive and proactive performance and processes. I'll use event analysis to demonstrate that a data-driven systems approach is essential to achieve productive outcomes that drive safety performance and success, both for the organization and for the community. I'll review what the critical data-driven elements are and why they are necessary. Now, in 2022, Dr. Andrew Hopkins presented on behalf of ICSI and went into great detail. You can see the red book that was produced by ICSI and Andrew Hopkins. He went into great detail regarding the types of information that should be collected in developing or transitioning to a high reliability organization. We could not be in more vehement agreement. And I've known Dr. Hopkins for quite a long time. I'll spend more time then on how to translate data into meaningful and actionable information. In the process, I'll review some of the unique challenges and opportunities facing the chemical industry in executing this approach and identify what I believe to be the most significant opportunity. And then I'll close by encouraging us all as a community to work together. So when I refer to systems approach, I'm equating this to one that is comprehensive and complete. The systems approach should be aligned with the priorities of executive leadership, documented and approved, executed in a manner that is methodical and consistent, and applied across both the product and the business life cycles, from accident investigations, which is the reactive part, to risk assessments in the change management process, which is proactive. A systems approach considers the robust contextual elements of the environment that lead to outcomes and events. So it's not just about the outcome or the occurrence that we need to focus on, but also the causal and contributing factors, both indirect and direct. And a systems approach to event analysis involves a sincere attempt, very sincere attempt, to understand how the outcome came to be so that we can better anticipate the future. This applies to both positive and negative actions and outcomes. For example, let's consider the situation in which there was a mechanical fatigue in a system which led to a chemical release inside a closed environment. This led to an explosion, resulting in serious injuries. We first learned that the frontline operator didn't regularly or adequately check the pressure settings. Case closed? No, I think we need to look further. We then learned that the company guidance for this process was not clear, nor was training provided for maintenance and inspection engineers. Also, the PHA, or process hazard assessment, did not include this potential explosion, as the release of this chemical wasn't anticipated to interact with other chemicals in the plant. On top of this, we learned that the regulator did not have required or recommended practices for reactive chemicals for this particular environment. So who or what caused and contributed to this accident? I would love for everybody to put up their hands right now. This is what I mean by a robust, contextual set of data that you need to collect. So the first step to a systems approach in event analysis is to identify the goals and system requirements. Executive leadership needs to set priorities that will dictate what information is collected and how it is to be acted upon. A set of taxonomies need to be defined to provide a common language. And I have that on the bottom there because there's quite a list, but that common language allows you to capture, categorize, analyze, interpret, and communicate information. So taxonomies allow for the ordered or hierarchical categorization of events or potential events, and as well as causal and contributing factors. For example, on the right side of this screen, you can see some graphics. On the very right, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and I won't venture to pronounce that acronym, developed the International Outage Code System for nuclear power plants. This taxonomy classifies at the highest level in the box to the inside, to the left, whether an outage was planned or unplanned due to the cause, under plant management control, or due to causes beyond plant management control. So that's the highest level of category. At lower levels, the taxonomy includes additional outage types and cause codes. And outages are further described by their start date, duration, and energy loss. Now, throughout the course of this discussion and presentation, you're going to see repeatedly the types of things that we need to collect and that are collected in investigations, but also to understand the context to make sure that we're taking a systems data-driven approach to this. So the type of structure needs to be created to include definitions for these categories, along with the process guidelines. The chemical, petrochemical, aviation, and other industries have also developed taxonomies to various degrees, along with the process guidelines. It facilitates an accurate understanding of the performance of your organization across the organization if you have many different departments or lines of business, but also if you share select data across the industry, even starting small, growing big, then that allows you to learn from each other and you speak a common language. So data collection and entry, in doing so, it requires multiple data sources, and they have to be brought together to build that context. And I'll go through some of the types of data that I most look for. It's both structured and unstructured, meaning it's could be numerical, or it could be narrative, or it could be photos, it could be measurements. Many different types of information will come together. And we can't stop there. Employees need training so that they will be able to consistently collect and enter these data based on the process guidelines that reflect which data to collect and how. And it has to be aligned with the categories and the definitions. So what I find most often is that if you have a pull down device or a checklist of some sort for employees to capture an anomaly, an unsafe condition, or an event, one of the biggest problems is knowing how you categorize what is a poor procedure, or that the procedure is very clear to somebody else, but that particular employee didn't understand it and therefore couldn't follow the procedure. So this is really important to have consistency in how you're collecting your event data. And finally, the analytic phases involve cleaning your data. I would love to show you all sorts of beautiful pictures of data that's not clean. Building relational databases and partnering analysts with subject matter experts. That's really important because the analysts can develop the queries, and then the subject matter expert can say, yes, that is exactly what we're looking for, what we're concerned about. And then they can also review the outcome of the analysis to say, wow, that doesn't match up with what I'm experiencing in my environment. So collecting the right data is most important. And I'll continue to go back to right data, but I'll focus on what I think, and there's broad consensus on what is the right data. So accident and investigation, incident investigations provide a really good opportunity, and they allow you more time to collect a comprehensive data set, right? If we have fatalities, if we have serious injuries, if we have a release that is exposing the community, you can almost guarantee that you're going to get resources immediately to put on that, because you're going to have media. You don't want to have your workers hurt, certainly not the community, and that doesn't build for good relations. Data for minor events, and there's a sliding scale there of what is minor, is equally valuable. Even if the event doesn't meet your internal or external reporting requirements. We miss out on cues from near events or unsafe conditions by not doing a thorough job in collecting information for lesser events or events with less significant outcomes. Now, here's a list of other data sources that could be collected. It's certainly not comprehensive, and every company and every domain will be a little different. But one thing that is definitely the same, and having been in the field and managed production, all sorts of very high risk activities, you have to proactively ask for input from frontline managers and frontline workers. This can help prevent an incident that these particular experts can see. What you're looking for is, if it's not just an anonymous submission, but you're going to look through those, what you're looking for, if you have the opportunity to walk the shop floor and ask people and help them feel comfortable, is what the reality on the shop floor is. And the shop floor could be in an airplane, the shop floor can be on a taxiway ramp. So this is really cross-domain. And what their concerns are. Are they concerned about deferred maintenance, corrosion, or staffing shortages where an event has not yet occurred? And how silly might they feel if they make a report and it's not valued and an event has not yet occurred? I guarantee you that's a tough hurdle to get over with the culture, but once you get well on your way, you'll see a lot more reports, and then they're going to eventually go down because you're going to be addressing those issues. Are workers deviating from procedures, or are they creating workarounds? Sometimes they have to because they don't have the equipment, and sometimes it's easier. So this is not a blame discussion. Risk assessments is another topic, not just for the current system, as well as for any planned changes. They're extremely useful to incorporate, and I would just call out prioritized set of risks, hazards, and mitigations. You can also capture changes that were implemented in technology, processes, and procedures. What was the change, and when did that occur? Downloading machine software and sensor data. I have learned many times over that, even though in the aviation domain, they can download the FOCWA or flight operations data from the flight deck. Not necessarily the case on a production plant. They may be able to, but they're not required. And then getting a download after the fact is tough. And it disappears. The data is wiped out perhaps every 10 days or 30 days. But downloading that machine software regularly and sensor data creates a baseline, not just for routine monitoring, to see how am I being efficient? Is it working as we anticipated? But also captures anomalies. And you can't go back and download or turn on the download button after an event has occurred. I've been in that situation where teams didn't turn it on. And afterwards, you have to resort to videos and conversations, and potentially they weren't even looking at the display. So research outcomes. That is something that we tried many times to do at the FAA when I was managing portfolios, trying to say, which research do I have the most confidence in that could solve a gap that I currently have? And sometimes it's a great idea, but it's not the right researchers. Sometimes you conducted the research and you have the data and in a digestible manner. That's really important. I think we're growing by leaps and bounds in terms of the types of data that we can build and pull together. Now, these data can be applied during the process of investigating an event that has already occurred. Again, that's reactive, or proactively integrated in advance to enhance efficiency and context for future events or risk assessments, and you already have the information there. You can efficiently do it. So now I'm going to talk about the depth and the breadth required to collect the right data. An accident or incident investigation should include a depth that extends, as you can see on the left side of this slide, extends from the government and regulators all the way down to the frontline operator or down to the actions that occurred. This is where the accident sequence or occurrence may have come to light or was raised to attention. The graphic to the right is an AXIMAP approach. It was first introduced by Rasmussen in 1997. Many people have derivatives of this model, just like the Swiss cheese model was probably a precursor to that when you have multiple layers. At a strategic level, what I really like about this approach is that it embodies a systems way of thinking. Many of the, say, fishbone or other models, and I don't want to be negative about any one model because they all have their unique place. This one, and I made the picture small so that we didn't dive into all the details because this particular example of, I believe, is Exxon, so I don't want to call anybody out. And all the details that are all this information is public. You can look online. But it starts from the regulator, the associations, the organizations and management, and how that has to flow down. And you collect that information, and that gets you away from focusing on just the last straw. Most people take the last straw and they work backwards. You have to know what the outcome is, but that doesn't mean you don't need to rule out and investigate the other levels in between. You can quickly rule them out, but you have to look at them. And that's important to document. In addition, it not only identifies the multiple layers of defense, but unlike some of, or many of the other models, it allows interactions between gaps or factors within and between the layers. So I hope you can see that there are arrows going in different directions, and sometimes they'll go back up to another layer. I find it super helpful in conceptualizing the interrelationships of the context for an event, and helpful for me in identifying and collecting the right data. So getting to the top down, bottom up, or I'll continue to reinforce that. What you're seeing on this slide is the integrated human and organizational performance model. IHOP for short, but it represents my perspective regarding how to maximize human and organizational performance to meet your mission goals. And it provides a map of the types of data that should be collected and considered when using a systems approach. What's unique about the IHOP is that it brings together a vertically integrated organizational construct and groups together elements that support the development of a high reliability organization. And I'll give you some examples as we walk through this. So at the top of the model, within the green outline, the performance goals for the company or agency fall under the categories, and this is my reference point. It's either safety driven or efficiency. So that could be productive. It could be safer. It definitely can't be less safe just because it's more productive. But you have these somewhat competing goals, and many of you in this industry might have seen the balance scale for cost versus safety, profit versus safety. So first, executive leadership must set and communicate priorities. This is predicated, and this is the assumption, on their acknowledging and commitment to the type of culture required to maintain or change their performance goals. So if you don't map out a path to meet your mission goals for performance, safety performance, production performance, then it's going to be challenging to develop the culture for you to achieve that. For example, one stated goal could be to enhance the safety of workers, fence-line communities, and the environment while maximizing efficiency. That's a balance that has to be communicated from the top down. So within the lower left-hand side of this model, in the green outline, represents the basic elements of design, operations, and safety. Now, most of these elements are already incorporated across many regulatory and guidance materials. And that's why I call them basic elements on the left-hand side. If you meet reporting requirements for various regulatory agencies, you would need to cite many of these regulations and documents. And again, this applies to both industry and government. Government has a lot of policy internally too. I find that operators or overseers could improve by viewing these elements as a collective set. For example, on the bottom row, I've identified and grouped, there are 4 boxes down there: the design of equipment, the design of process, personnel selection, and training. As many times as these elements are not designed simultaneously or considered together. And an example would be that you didn't have personnel selection criteria. You didn't test the machinist when they came into the shop, yet then something goes wrong. Or maybe you didn't train them because you expected they had a certificate. It's important that you know that they have the information they need to carry out their job successfully, because managers and frontline workers alike, all from the top to the bottom, no one wants to do a bad job. No one wants to hurt anybody or break something. Very few. Now, the elements on the lower right side of this IHOP model within the green box represent how to execute on and reinforce the goals and priorities. This is as set by executive leadership, which is how the culture is set. It has to be a constant top-down, bottom-up. It's critical from the top down to lead by example. And that's not just executive leadership, it's middle managers, frontline managers, all the way down. And you have to measure what is connected to your organizational priorities. We have many examples of measuring things other than what we say is important. So it's super important that everybody in the company says, the CEO said we're going to do that. We're absolutely going to do that. And providing all of the resources required to accomplish it. So equally important is capturing and acting upon those data when received by managers and back up to executive leadership. So when you receive that information, if you don't respond, acknowledge, and do something about it and congratulate people, then they're going to think it's not really important. They're going to stop reporting or stop doing the things that you say that you value. Now, some of the middle and the frontline managers could be a bit intimidated or overwhelmed by this prospect. They may not have been given permission, and they're given really tight deliverables and timelines, and perhaps maybe understaffed. They may not have given permission to actually collect that data. Sometimes legal teams step in and say that makes us vulnerable. I wish I could ask how many people in the audience has had that experience before. But this is the difference between a high risk and a high reliability organization. Many companies, and what I will say is this, many companies aren't collecting data and information that they already could, and they're looking to be predictive. I'm not saying predictive is not important. Look at my tagline, anticipate the future. However, if you're not collecting information regarding the past and what you have today, what your machinery is doing, what the interfaces are experienced by the operators, then you're missing out on an opportunity. So I always try to tell people, instead of being overwhelmed by starting out too big, let's crawl before we walk. You can listen to, just like I said before, you can listen to and learn from data from the shop floor, from your employees, and you can talk to multiple employees. And if you're hearing all the same thing, then you know it's probably happening. And that will serve as your foundation from which you can build another data set, or other types of data, and help them to feel comfortable in the process. So I think that's actually really important, is that it doesn't have to be earth-shattering the first round and the first go. Now I'm going to move on to some of the challenges and opportunities faced by the chemical industry in employing an aggregate level systems approach to event analysis. The first one is that there are multiple domains within the chemical industry. And I don't think I would have to tell most everybody on this call. But to name a few, we have chemical, petrochemical, right? And what is chemical? They're all chemicals. Pharmaceutical, we have storage, transportation, fertilizer, chlorine, ammonia, propane. So some of these, or many of these organizations, have really a lot of overlap with each other in fundamental ways, and are members of multiple industry associations. As an example, petrochemical companies often own and manage refineries, storage facilities, rail, pipelines. I believe I'd mentioned that. And that means that you might be sharing your one set of information in a different format with one association and another set with another. It depends on if you're using the same guidance materials. To add to that, the oversight structure is distributed with many regulators across federal, state, and local boundaries. It's much more distributed than it is in aviation, although if you were to talk to somebody in airports, you would find out, and maybe comms companies, you would find that it's perhaps a little less integrated than it once was, or we all thought. But in the chemical industry, the regulations, the recommended practices, and the reporting requirements are not fully harmonized. And this is nothing new. So even a few weeks ago, when one of the new EPA rules came out, there was a lot of discussion about now we have to give a different set of data to OSHA, a different set of data to who knows, PHMSA, EPA. And so that makes it really challenging. I find that it has been easier in the aviation industry when you have a more integrated oversight model. So even the accident investigators and the entities, say for chemicals, I'll just say Houston because I've been there many times for chemical upsets. They're overlapping and multiple, and then you have different investigative interests, approaches, timelines, findings, and recommendations. You'll notice you have the local police, you have the state, you have, and OSHA and EPA could be federal and state or mostly state. I found this interesting when I was at the NTSB and we had a highway. So chemical domain should not feel incredibly alone by this. There was I don't know who would recall because I can't see hands or eyes, a bridge collapse in Minneapolis. And I would say it is about the 2006 or 7 time frame. And the bridge was over a river with one jurisdiction on one side and one jurisdiction on the other. And then what are you going to do when the bridge splits in the middle, right? It's the same thing when for the NTSB, when the Coast Guard with like jurisdiction over something that happens in their domain or close to their domain. And the NTSB also has the jurisdiction for marine. So I'm just saying those are some of the challenges. If you extrapolate from that, then it makes sense that there are multiple uncoordinated taxonomies and metrics. And most of them, not all, are outcome-based, which means they focus only on the occurrence type and severity, and they exclude, or it's just too tough of a nut to crack, the causal and contributing factors. Thankfully, data sharing is occurring within industry members associations. I've seen it firsthand. I applaud their efforts, and they are doing it in a different way in the chemical industry than has been done traditionally in the aviation industry, where the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, put it together and protected that information and was able to avoid FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act, if the information is housed by a third party actor. So, but because it's usually done by association and it's not public data, they're learning within that community, which is wonderful. However, this does lead to data sharing silos and limits consolidation of the additional contextual data that you'd like. Now, unfortunately, there are few efforts to aggregate publicly available data across government agencies. When I say government, I mean at all levels, federal down to state and local. In contrast, for example, I'll just give you one example again of the FAA. They have an internal data sharing effort, and they've coordinated, and we've been doing this, when I was there, but they are still doing this for years. And it includes the FAA database includes FAA data, NTSB data, and probably, I don't know, there were probably 10 different sources at the time that I first learned about it. I don't know how many more now. Insurance claims. So you can pull all that information together to tell a story. Now notice that I've highlighted taxonomies in this slide because I believe that their development and their harmonization could be the most significant opportunity. So here's what I'm telling you. Keep hearing me say it. And I teased you at the front, said there's an opportunity. Here it is. It's the most significant opportunity to enhance the level of safety and performance of your organization as well as the broader community. Now, let's just say it's just your individual organization. Between all the different sites, and maybe some are international, you are still going to be affecting the reputation of your entire community. So that does help the broader community. You can look at it that way. Excuse me here while I pour some more water. So today, I'm going to shift now to talk a little more intensely, this slide and the next one, about taxonomies. Once again, the definition of this is a ordered and hierarchical set of categories within which you can take your data and bin that. I'll provide an example for an event investigation. These 5 questions incorporate the minimum basic categories where you can start. And every type of application might be slightly different. I'll start with the easiest question, because I think we normally put these in a little different order, but I'm going to start with the easiest and then go down to what I think is the most challenging. The first one is when did it happen? Well, you can have a timestamp and you can have it in GMT time. Always go back to that, right? Where? Now, this includes the physical and geographic location. It could start with a region, a country, a state, a city, however is decided upon for that taxonomy. You can even go down to the lat long if you'd like that. And sometimes that's important, especially if you want to pull up weather data from that day. You will need the exact location. This also includes the phase of operation, though, such as an aircraft landing or taxiing, or an industry plant or reactor startup or shutdown. So you can categorize however many of those that you would like to of the phase, and that goes under the general question of where. Who? Now, initially we think of the immediate operator or owner, right, of a company name, but we have a very nested set of organizations today, and the structures are mixed with contractors. Sometimes there's a responsibility of the head company, and sometimes there's not. And so it makes this seemingly straightforward question far more complex. So consider an event that involves 2 operators and multiple contractors. And what about when a company buys another company and the procedures aren't integrated yet? Whose fault is that, right? And you have to think about those things. What is always the first item that catches attention? Now, either people say that the pipe broke. I say it's the last straw. The building fell down. There was an explosion. There was a fire, a mid-air collision, a runway incursion. So that is the outcome. And finally, why? That's the most complex. It's really challenging to consider in your hierarchy and in your taxonomy where to bin something. And I gave the example earlier of an operator who didn't follow the procedure, but it wasn't clear why he didn't follow it, or she. So based on your data collection goals, taxonomies associated with each question will allow you to consistently bin your data. Going back to the aviation transportation domain, it's actually they have a highly integrated global community when it comes to harmonizing. So having a common taxonomy, set of taxonomies to aggregate safety data. And that's put together by ICAO. And for those of you who may not know that term, it's the International Civil Aviation Organization. So it's like the FAA for the world. They leverage some of the same taxonomies. And on the right side of this slide here, and this is a web picture that I took, so you can easily go in there and download all their guidance regarding their taxonomies. And then it's applied a little bit different for different countries and regions because they have different regulations, different cultures, different requirements, but they at least use a common taxonomy. And I think that's incredibly useful. They translate the category. So when they merge taxonomies or change something, and we're going to talk this a little bit more on the next slide, you have to translate how you're going to categorize the change in one database or another, one taxonomy or another. So consistency in collecting and bidding data, along with a means to translate that data, supports aggregate level analysis. So if you can see from this ICAO website, there are taxonomies that come together, and you can apply them based on what you're looking for. The taxonomies are not hard and fast. They are at a point in time, but they need to adapt and for the data to be integrated to other communities for broader learning opportunities. You have to be agile enough to meet the dynamic nature of even your own internal taxonomy. Say, for example, you learn something new and you add another category under organizational performance or environmental performance that didn't exist before. You now have to figure out how to go about incorporating that together. So this is an example, again, from the website, from ICAO, of a 3-page sheet at one point in time when they had to integrate legacy data in with new data, and it had some new categories. So it's also gonna, you have to have an agile IT infrastructure, because if not, then it'll break and your databases won't be able to communicate with each other, and you won't be able to communicate with others. The training has to be in place, etc. You can't monitor very consistently because you're not sure if the data that you have is accurate. So I'm just going to slip to the very last slide. In summary, I apologize for going over. My vision is great. I can't really see anything on that screen. So, but let's see here. Applying a data-driven, so in summary, applying a data-driven systems approach to event analysis is essential to achieve productive outcomes that drive safety performance and success for not just your organization, but for the broader community, regardless of how broad that is. This approach requires a common set of taxonomies to ensure that you measure how you categorize, interpret, communicate, and the safety information. It has to be comprehensive, consistent, and aligned with the priorities of executive leadership. Now, the IHOP model is a framework that can help you to identify the types of data across your organization that you need to collect. It's a framework to help you enhance your human and organizational performance. So within your organization, having an accurate and common representation of your current level of safety and performance and where you're trending, that will enable you to better focus your investments and attention. The greater and more significant opportunity is to be able to share select information between companies to enhance the level of safety and performance for the broader community. I know this isn't easy, but I'm convinced that through working together as a community, we can make significant strides in safety and make this happen. Thank you.